Welcome to Stocking the Pantry with Hal. It's a series of videos, articles, and my ramblings produced in cooperation with the Point Defiance Ruston Senior Center. Our goal is to provide information and resources to help everyone to be better prepared and reduce food waste. So let's get started. So of course, we need to figure out what we're going to put the sauerkraut and salt in so that it can ferment. So the traditional container for making sauerkraut and other fermented items was what we would call an open crock, which is exactly what it is. It's usually a ceramic crock, anywhere from the 1 gallon size up to like 5 or 7 gallons. They're huge ones. And you can see this one is a nice one. There's often some decoration glazed into it. And you see it's perfectly smooth inside. And you would pack it, as you'll see later in this demonstration, when we make a quart of sauerkraut, that you pack in the shredded cabbage and the salt and the spices, and then you want to put a leaf over it and some kind of weights, and we'll talk about different kinds of weights in a minute. The second one, which was, I have no idea when they invented these, but they're really cool, and they're called a water sealed. And so you can see it's got a very nice ceramic top, and then it has a high center, and it has like a well here. And if you have weights, they're of some kind of ceramic material, and they go down in there too. But what you do is you put the lid on, and then you fill this rim with water, and that seals it and helps keep the air out. But one of the most recent things that folks have started using are just mason jars, anywhere from a half pint to a gallon size. And you want to get the wide mouth because there are various kinds of seals, which I'll show you in a moment. But this is really convenient, especially if you don't know if you're going to like a particular combination. You can make a small combo and try it out. So once you have all the cabbage in it, you want to seal the air out as best you can. And so usually what the process is to hold back a leaf of cabbage, which you would put into your jar. If you're using one of the types of crocks, you put several leaves. And then you want to make sure that you keep it from floating up, because there'll be a lot of water coming out of the cabbage. And sometimes you add some extra salt water to it to help the fermentation process. So you have the leaf making the seal, and then you put some kind of weight on it. Now this is from a set of nice glass weights. A lot of this stuff was given to me over the years, by the way, because some of these things like the water seal crock are very expensive right now. That's why I tend to really like to use the jars. But then you want to be able to seal out any air from getting in, and yet, like in any fermentation process, it's going to be producing carbon dioxide. You want to allow that to get out. So it's in a way like making wine. So one of the things that you can do is just basically get one of these airlocks from any kind of a wine company, put in some kind of, they make gaskets for these, put it in there, and when everything's in there, you just put that on, and you'll pretty soon be seeing gas bubbling out. Another way is with an item that's called a pickle pipe. And you can't really see that, and there's no way I can demonstrate it, but there's a little hole, a little flap that's cut in here. And when the pressure of the carbon dioxide comes up, it pushes that flap up enough to let the carbon dioxide out. But the latest toy that I've got that I really like is a fermentation lid. It's built on the same principle where it has a kind of a valve where gas can come out, but no oxygen can come in. You screw it on, and then it comes with this little pump for removing any existing oxygen in there. So there's a lot that I'm pulling out right now, of course, because it's almost empty. The thing that's really cool about these is these have these little dials on top here, which you can move. Well, if your fingers are strong enough, move them and set them to the day and date you start. Because the fermentation process can be anywhere from 1 to 6 weeks, depending on how sour you want your ferment to get. So we'll be going through the whole process. Oh, and one that I forgot. If you don't want to buy a set of these weights or use other kinds of weights, you can just take a regular baggie, fill it with water. I would put one inside of the other so that it doesn't leak like this one is. And you push that down, especially if you're using one of the larger crocks. That really works well. Well, this is the last in our series of pickling, and it's the last technique, which is fermentation, which is sometimes called long brine, because it takes anywhere from a week to maybe 6 weeks. And what it does is it basically takes the existing sugars that are in the vegetables and turns them into lactic acid with the lactose bacteria. Now, the way it does this is by creating a very salty, which is one of the reasons it's called brining, a very salty environment that kills most all bacteria except the ones that produce the lactic acid. So the basic ingredients for sauerkraut, which is one of the simplest ones you can make and a good one to demonstrate, because cabbage itself has a high amount of the lactic producing bacteria on it naturally. For us, we hardly notice it. Some people, raw cabbage will give them gas because it kind of has some of that lactic bacteria on it. But in this case, what we start with is raw cabbage. Other recipes, which you can find by following some of the links, would take you to recipes that would add things like carrots and onions, things like that. Salt is the other absolute in sauerkraut. But then you can have all different kinds of spices. Traditionally, juniper berries, peppercorns, mustard seed, dill seed, and then, of course, caraway or fennel seeds. So we start by preparing the cabbage. Now, I've done part of the preparation ahead of time because it does take a while for some of it to work. So what you do is start with the cabbage, just shred it up. I kind of like it a little bigger. Other people shred it much finer. But then what we'll do, and there's a proportion, it's about 2 teaspoons of salt to every pound of cabbage. So you're going to be needing to weigh your cabbage. You put on the salt, you mix it well, and then you let it stand a minimum of 15 minutes. So this would probably be a good time to talk about what kind of containers we want to use to complete the fermentation. After about 15 minutes, you probably can't see that, but already you're getting some liquid out of it. And now this comes one of the harder parts. They ask you to massage, which just basically means squeezing the cabbage to get more of the water out of it, to have it break down and open up. And they suggest that you do it for about 5 minutes. Now you can see that I'm squeezing a lot of water out of this. Now we're going to be putting that water right back in it to help fermenting, but what we're doing is breaking down some of the cells. Now, some of you may not be able to do a lot of squeezing, arthritis in the hands, things like that. There are other ways to deal with it. This is going to appear later. It's basically a tamper that comes with a lot of sauerkraut making kits. And what you can do is basically tamp it instead of squeezing it. But in any case, you can see that it's already breaking down well. And so we're going to be making just about a half of quart of sauerkraut, leaving a lot of room so that you can see the process. So one of the really important things, which I should have mentioned right at the beginning, but there's plenty of time for you to do this before you start. Everything needs to be immaculately cleaned and sterilized. So after you've massaged the cabbage and other vegetables so that it's nice and relaxed and all the cell walls are breaking down, we're going to pack it into our fermentation vessel, which in this case is a wide-mouth quart jar. Now I need to mention again that everything should be very clean, very sterile, because even though we're going to be using the brine to kill the bacteria, hopefully, that would be causing mold and bad flavors in it, we want to help it along as best we can. So after everything has been well sterilized, you go ahead and pack in and one of the advantages of a crock is you can just kind of like throw everything in there. We want to get all the juice that has come out so far into it. And we're going to tamp it down well. If you don't want to get one of these tampers, if you have a small enough hand, you can use your hand. Or what I used for years is I had a small wooden meat tenderizer that the tenderizing part was just on the ends, but I could use the back of the head to push it in. Now, I deliberately didn't make enough so that it fills the whole thing, because I want everyone to be able to easily see what's going on. So once we get that, then we're going to put in our cabbage leaf and let it spread out so it helps hold things down. And then on top of that, we're going to put our glass weight in this case. This would be the place where you'd use a small baggie if you didn't have any kind of a weight system. Now, what you want to be sure is that there is liquid to start with. The liquid that's already naturally out of it, you can't probably see it, but it's right here. But we want enough liquid that it's up over the top of the cabbage and the weight. So we've made up in advance a 2% salt solution, which is 1 teaspoon of salt to 1 cup of water. And we put up enough. I want to make sure that's fully covered, so a little bit more. Great. Then we put on our lid. We're going to be using this one today instead of one of the others. And we're going to suck the air out. You can see from the bubbles. And we're going to set it for today's date. And you want to keep this at about room temperature. And I like to make sure that it's in a fairly dark place because you don't want the sun to overheat it or anything like that. Now, if you have packed this as tight to the top as you can, which I wouldn't recommend if you're using these, which help pull the air out to begin with, that you set it in some kind of like a pie plate or something, so that if it starts to bubble too much and you filled it too full, it's not going to start leaking or force liquid out from the top. That would go all over the place. And so I started one a couple of days ago. Here it is. And you can see it's just starting to bubble. And you can see that what was a clear liquid has turned kind of milky. And so now you want to check it every day or two. Make sure that it's not getting mold on the top. Froth and bubbles is okay, but anything that looks like floating islands of mold or anything like that, the batch has gone off. You need to throw it away. And then after about, and if you get a good recipe, it will tell you the approximate time when they suggest you can start tasting it. I would say about 2 weeks on this one. And then you take the top off and carefully fish some out and taste it. Because the longer it sits, the sourer it will get. And so if you don't want really, really sour, you're going to want to just leave it for the recommended minimum time. Now, this, you could can it, you could water bath can it. However, then the probiotics, which this produces, which is one of the big health benefits on any fermented product, are going to be killed. So this is always going to be a refrigerator product. That's why making it in the smaller things, or knowing who you're going to give it away to, is always a good idea if you make a gallon or more of it. So that's about it. We've seen 3 different ways over this series of making pickles: refrigerator, fresh packed with added brine, and now fermentation. So thank you, and hope to see you here again. Thank you for sharing this time with us. If you'd like more information about the Center for Food Preservation Arts, including more recipes, check out our website at preservedfoods.blogspot.com and follow us on Facebook so you get notifications of upcoming articles, videos, and events. And we hope to see you back here for our next virtual canning party.